Welcome to Forbes Talks. Joining me now is Chloe Sorvino, staff writer here at Forbes. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
Great, we're happy to have you. So you lead the coverage here of both food and agriculture at Forbes, so you're the perfect person to talk all things Thanksgiving dinner with. But it looks like the price of turkeys are going to be increasing this year. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, inflation's been hitting every single Thanksgiving item, but turkey has been the worst hit. This is going to be the most expensive Thanksgiving that has ever been in recorded history, which that's a big deal. And so turkeys are up quite considerably compared to last year, double digits. And on top of that, there's been a shortage of supply.
So aside from inflation, what else is impacting the turkey prices this year?
So there's been a shortage of supply in different pockets across the country. And that's due to several different factors, but the biggest one is this major outbreak of avian flu that's been ravaging flocks of birds across the US, but particularly turkeys. Millions of turkeys have been killed this year because of bird flu and this ongoing outbreak. It's now become the worst outbreak in recorded history, topping what had been around a decade ago when more than 50 million birds were infected and then killed.
So you're mentioning that it's affecting different pockets of the country. Can you expand on how geography plays a factor here?
Yeah. So while there will be turkeys being fed at tables around the country, there are places where it's going to be particularly hard to find, especially the bigger birds. The USDA released a warning earlier this month that the 20-pound plusers are really going to be hard to find in some locations. And so they'll be easier to get in places where there is a lot of turkey production, but in places in the Midwest where there have been a lot of these avian flu outbreaks, those have been the birds that have often gotten the worst of the virus.
And so are these affecting all brands equally, or some brands really impacted more than others?
It's really unfortunately looked like it's been based on where these companies are. So you have the top two turkey growers, for example. You have Butterball, which is based in North Carolina and hasn't really been that badly hit. About less than 0.5% of their overall supply has been hit. But then you have the second largest turkey producer in the country, Jenny O. They're based in Minnesota, which is one of the states that's been really badly hit by avian flu, and they could be down turkey production as much as 30% this year, which is an astronomical amount, especially when then you consider how prices have already been soaring so much because there is this lack of supply and really high demand.
Yeah, I want to talk about that inflation factor. How has inflation impacted meat prices compared to other foods?
Meat has been the one of the categories that's been the most impacted by inflation. Meat has more than doubled the rate of inflation. And that's because Americans are continuing to eat a lot of meat. And it's one of the places where they're least willing to change what they're eating.
And what's having more of an impact, would you say, on the price of turkey? Inflation or avian flu? Or does it depend?
It's the combination of these factors, along with also, increasing fuel costs because of Ukraine and just the kind of ramifications of the grain trade around the country. This is kind of really a perfect storm in Thanksgiving history, so to speak. And turkeys have been caught in the crosshairs.
And you mentioned that this is the highest price people will be paying for Thanksgiving to date so far. So do you think in 2023 these prices will cool off and we won't have the impact of the avian flu, or will we still be paying even higher prices?
Well, this outbreak of avian flu has been going on for quite some time already, and a lot of folks expected the outbreak to cool off entirely over this past summer. And while there was a dip in cases, it really did come roaring back in August and September and has continued to stay here, which is a huge problem. There's lasting ramifications there because if this outbreak doesn't go away, which it's seeming like it really might not, there are going to have to be hard questions answered around where production is and how confined this is, and how operations really need to change to better prevent outbreaks and this really quick spread of outbreaks moving forward.
And how would one contain an outbreak of this magnitude?
So when this happens, it's crazy. There's essentially a no get out area that, the USDA or local health officials will come in, and you pretty much can't leave the quarantine zone. And often there are several large operations in, a quarantine zone, which means that, it's you and also your competitor's farm that may be hit, or it could be spreading to, there's a lot of different, ways that the industry has tried to prevent these types of viruses from spreading. But unfortunately, you have things like a worker going from one farm to another and carrying the virus on their shoes or on their jacket, or, simple things that really can make this expand quite considerably. But really the other question you have to ask the industry long term is, why are so many operations in the clear pathways of these migratory fly zones of wild birds, which have been additionally driving the spread of avian flu? And so you have large scale operations with lots of birds confined in one area or one zip code or a few zip codes. And then you have these flyways that are kind of always going to be there because that's the pattern of nature. And so it's a long-term question about those operations that are in these crosshairs and what's going to happen if this outbreak doesn't go away.
So when can we expect the outbreak to go away, or is that just up in the air based on those factors?
It's continuing to rage. And so winter is particularly a bad time typically for avian flu. It often will burn off in warmer temperatures or warmer months. And so this winter could get pretty bad. I mean, there's already been more than 50 million birds overall killed. That's not just turkeys, that's chickens and egg layers too. But that's a lot. That's a lot of waste. That's a lot of resources going to produce animals that are just getting killed and going into landfills often.
Yeah, that sounds like a major impact. So do you think that this, coupled with inflation, will have people switching up their menus this Thanksgiving, instead of turkeys maybe opting for another meat?
Potentially. I mean, ham is also, has also increased a lot due to inflation, but I'm getting a lot of different emails from food magazines about different side dishes that can become the main event, and ways to do mushrooms and cauliflowers as that kind of feast dish. So I think there's a lot of people who aren't just even looking at tofurkey, which is growing a lot too, but going beyond and just trying to kind of reimagine the holiday in a way that works for them and what they want to eat.
Yeah, the average price has gone up significantly in the past 2 years, 20% from 2021, which was a record high, and then 40% from 2020. So there have been signs inflation is cooling down. When do you think that we can see that in the prices of meat and other foods?
Economists have told me that, especially in meat, you might start seeing some movement early 23, maybe into the spring, the second quarter. And so we'll see. But, I wonder what a potential recession or other macroeconomic factors and how that might end up changing too. But that's what the predictions are right now.
Okay, well, I do want to look in the future still some more. So you've reported that this may be the last year before lab-grown turkey is on the table. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so there is a major, major milestone this month in the cultivated meat industry, the industry where meat is grown in lab bioreactors from animal cells without any slaughtering having to happen. It was really the first time that the FDA issued a response around how this meatless meat is created and made and produced for a commercial audience. And so they gave a no questions letter back to Upside Foods, which is based in Silicon Valley, and said that they can continue to proceed with that regulatory approval process to get sold in grocery stores, restaurants, fast food, you name it. And so we're now at the precipice of this major eating change, and there will be lab grown meat on menus up for sale probably somewhat soon. It could be either very expensive or it might be very heavily subsidized by the startups that are selling these products. But it'll be exciting to see. It'll be interesting to see who adopts it, what early sales are like. And right now, the chicken was what had a no questions letter about it, but poultry is, a similar sector, and turkey and many other meats are going to be well on their way to becoming cultivated in labs. And so we're really at the cliff here, and the future of food is upon us.
That sounds like an exciting time. So, you did mention the price point of these no-kill meats. How expensive do you think this will be? Going to a restaurant, you want lab-grown meat. What's that going to cost you?
I mean, the economics of these startups is kind of completely out of whack right now, and production is super, super expensive. It costs tens, if not hundreds of thousands to produce very, very small quantities of this type of meat. And so while startups are all working towards commercializing, accessibility continues to be a question. And it's not for sale in the US yet, but it's for sale in Singapore. And there's a US company that's approved to sell it in Singapore. And it's been selling for more than a year plus now. And right now sells roughly at the same amount of an entree. It's a $23 Singapore dollars. And, that company is taking a huge loss on those sales, but, they're doing it to get this product out there and to get people excited about trying to demand it in their markets around the world.
Do you think there could ever be a time, come Thanksgivings to come, where people are, instead of ditch the regular turkey, have the lab grown, and it's mass produced instead?
I mean, absolutely. There are dozens of billionaires that want to make it happen. And also, that includes not even just billionaires, other investors like the Whole Foods founder himself, who invested in the company that got the no questions letter, Upside Foods in Silicon Valley. And so, there are a lot of institutional players and other players in the food industry who are keenly invested in scaling this type of meat a reality. And so it's coming whether we want it or not, especially with this regulatory green light. But how it is produced, how it continues to get to consumers, and the accessibility continues to be up for debate, and where the rubber meets the road.
Well, Chloe, as updates come, I hope you come back to join us. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk turkey.